Today in this demo, we are going to talk about what's new in language and translator service. And with further ado, let me start the demo.
Okay, so let's start with the user scenario. Today we're going to be loan issuers at a bank who are looking to create web applications to digitize and view a variety of different loan records that we have. I'm going to be showing two different demos to complete this task. First showing our language studio, and then also showing our unified language API. So we're going to start with the understanding that we've already scanned and transcribed our paper loans, but our first task is going to be identifying key pieces of information from each loan, so things like loan amount, lender, and borrower names. So with that, I'm going to be pulling up our Language Studio service. This is a web experience, kind of a playground where you can try a variety of our different language services. So things like summarizing information, document translation, but for the specific task of extracting, so identifying words or phrases in tasks or in documents and being able to label them as things like loan amount, then we'll have to be using the service of NER, which is named entity recognition. Our language services show we have two different offerings. First, a pre-built version, so we have predefined categories of things like persons, geographic entities. These are pre-built models where we can already label and categorize these words and phrases. But we also have an option for custom named entity recognition. This is for specific business use case scenarios, things where we want like loan amount. That's a pretty specific category, so we'd want to train our own custom model. So I'm going to be showing a document that I've already, or a project I've already started. While we're waiting for the load, I also have it open here. But here you can see the custom named entity recognition model. On the left tab here, we can see all the various steps of training the model. We have data labeling, training your jobs, seeing the model performance, deploying the model, and also testing the deployments. With data labeling, you can see we have our scanned and transcribed documents, and then also on the right here, the various entities that we want to be categorizing words and phrases within those texts into those buckets. One of the key piece of customer feedback that we'd heard was that the most time-consuming part of this entire workflow is being able to label all this data. So today I'm going to be showing a new feature that we added, which is integrating Azure OpenAI's GPT models to help you label this data a little bit faster. So as you can see here, I can zoom in a little bit. Sorry about that. We're going to be using auto-label GPT. This will help us speed up our labeling process using suggested labels from Azure OpenAI's GPT technology. I'm going to start by configuring the job by selecting an Azure OpenAI resource that I've already allocated and selecting a deployment. And then here I can specify which of these entities I want to be auto-labeled. I'm going to select all of them. And here I can also select which documents I want to be labeled. I'm just going to select the first one. And I'll start the job. This might also take a bit of time. And in the meantime, I can show you, I've already run this before. And if we go to the first text document, you can see here, this is the transcribed loan document. And we have various entities within the document that have been labeled. And you can see here, we also have various things like lender address, loan amount that have been labeled by AI. And we can select on the right here, either to accept or reject those suggestions. Okay, I will now move to my second demo. This is showcasing our unified language API. Now we're looking to display and parse these loan records on a web app. So I'm going to be showing you the summarization service as well as our pre-built NER. So this is what we're going to eventually want to be showcasing, something like a loan summary. The summarization is here, and also things like the date, the person, the location. These are entities that we're extracting from the loan documents and be able to show it on a web app. To do this, I'm going to be now showing you our public documentation. This is the public documentation for Azure Cognitive Services for Language, and we have here all the various services that we have, and there's like overviews of these various services, tutorials, and something I want to emphasize is with Azure Cognitive Services for Language, we have a unified API. So with one endpoint and API call, we can call a variety, or one endpoint key, we are able to call a variety of different services. So things like summarization and NER can all be called within one script. So I'm going to be showing you the quick start, which is the tutorial for summarization. To set up, we will need a language key, an endpoint, And we also have some starter code here that I'll be copying. And then I'll also be doing the same for NER, going to that quick start and copying just some of the sample code here. I also want to show you, this is what it is like to use or copy the key and the endpoint. I've set up a language resource, and going to the key and endpoints tab, I can copy the key and the endpoint. And I've pulled that up here on Visual Studio, pasted the key, the endpoint, and here we also have another example of one of those transcribed loan agreements. So now, I can also show you the various methods that I've copied from the sample code. We have here the API call for summarization, and we also have the API call for NER. And this is where I can run this one script. And in a couple seconds, I also have run it above if we need to wait. Yeah, I'll just show you what's already been output. But we can see both the outputs from both of the API calls. We have the extracted summarization here. You can specify the number of sentences, but this is a 2-sentence excerpt from the loan agreement, summarizing what's going on. And then we also have some named entities identified. So things like 315 have been identified as date time. Casey Jensen have been identified as person. And this is also where I can take some of these outputs on the console and parse it, send it over to our index web app, and over here also see this web app where some of that information can also be shown on the web. Okay, great. I will now pass it over to Krishna.
Let's do. Switch to display. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, on the translate side, we are introducing a plugin for Azure OpenAI. So the plugin will help you to translate across 125 plus languages which the service supports. And also, it also helps you to translate using the customization translation models which has been built for Azure Translator Service. So that way it can bridge the gap between now and till the GPT matures to do all the stuff. And apart from that, we are also introducing, before that, let me show you the quick demo on that, how it looks like. Okay, so here is the translator plugin, which is integrated as part of the chat playground in Azure OpenAI Studio. And here you can see the request is to create an invitation in Tamil language. So the plugin kicks in and get the invitation translated in Tamil language. So let me quickly put one more text where I'm making a request to write a message for my mom in, say, Chinese, and that I'll be coming late. And here you can see the GPT uses the translator plugin and get it translated. And coming back to the slide, I don't have a working demo, but this is something which is very hot from our developers, that we have the translator and detect tools as part of the prompt flow. And going forward, you can use the prompt flow and you can use these tools to create a pre and post processing steps before sending your prompts to GPT. Other thing which we are announcing is a document translation capability in Language Studio. So Rina showed you a bunch of language skills. If you want to build any of these language skills in international language, you may need a training set in all those languages. If you don't have sufficient training data, then you can use the document translation functionality in the studio. It's quite simple, and it supports 31 different file extensions. As a prerequisite, you need to have an Azure Translator resource, and the resource needs to be configured to managed identity, and there need to be a storage account, and the storage account needs to configure the translator resource with the storage blob data contributor as a permission. Once that is done, then you can click on the document translation, and it will take you to the creating a translation job. Here you can see the translator resource and the storage resource has been pre-configured. And you can select any of the target language, say Chinese. I'm going to translate in Chinese and say Thai. And I can upload the files from the local machine, or I can pick it from the blob storage. So here I'm going to pick some document from the blob storage. I'm going to use the 3 documents which Rina used for demo. And I'm going to convert them, and I can have the option either to get the document, translate a document, put it in the blob storage, or download it to the local file. So, and here this is an optional step where you can use the custom machine translation models to train it, or provide us glossary files to get a specific translation based on your dictionary. It takes a few seconds, and it will get done. And meanwhile, while it happens, let me show you. Let it run, and I will come back to this. Yep, the translation job succeeded, and you can see you can download the documents, and here you can also see the history of prior translations. Here the document gets translated into Chinese and simplified and Thai language. The next quick demo is on the translator connector for Power Automate. And this is an upgrade from the V2 version of the Power Automate connector. And if you see the previous version of the translator connector, it had functionality to just translate and get languages and direct, and not much. And in the new version of the translator connector, what we have done is we have incorporated both the text translation as well as document translation. You can do a document translation in a workflow automation, and you can also do the text translation API in a more comprehensive way. It supports transliteration, and it also supports all the optional functionality which is present in the text translation API. Thereby, you can get a very comprehensive Power Automate workflow using the translator connector. Those are the new functionalities which we have announced during the Build conference, and here are the resources which will provide you the documentation and how to get these functionality with you. Thank you. That's it.